Hello and welcome to GameSec. We are talking about unreleased games this time.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, the games that I played, the majority of them, I'm glad they weren't released because they're big steaming piles of crap, but there was a few exceptions there.
I played some good ones. So,
Did you? Well,
yeah.
Thanks for handing me off the bad ones.
You're welcome. And again, we are playing these on real systems. You can use the EverDrive family to play a lot of these. Other games can be burned onto CDs or whatever if you can find them. They're up to you to find yourself. We're not going to link you to them, but have fun with that. Anyway, I've got the first game, so let's get right to it. Rescue on the Genesis is a game by Psygnosis, and it was never released. From everything I've read, it was completely complete. In this game, you play as a futuristic centurion who flies a ship around different areas in order to rescue miners. To do this, you hop out of your ship and run around on foot. In fact, it kind of reminds me of Blaster Master. Anyway, you find the miner and you tell him to follow you back to the ship. Once you both get there, that miner is considered rescued. But be careful, as the miners are not invincible, nor can they do all of the cool stuff you can do, like float in midair for a limited amount of time. Some miners will give you tools that'll help you get to areas where other miners are hidden. After 6 of these levels, you get to play a 3D stage where you fly to the next area. You think the developers ever played Starfox? Yeah, I'm thinking they were pretty big fans. These areas are a nice bonus and they're pretty cool. The graphics are very good with lots of small details everywhere. The music is outstanding with great sound quality and none of that screechiness of US-made Genesis games. Maybe that's because it wasn't made in the US. The game itself is also very fun to play and some of the puzzles can get a little complex. The developer who made this game, Tempest, was actually frustrated that the game got cancelled, so they dumped the game and released it online themselves as freeware. I really don't blame him at all for being frustrated, pouring all that work into making this game and all of a sudden it just gets cancelled for no one ever to see again. Yeah, that would piss me off too. They made a good game and it deserves to be played, so check it out if you can.
Mr. Bloopy for the Super Nintendo is definitely a game for young kids. It's pretty much a game where you need to solve oversimplistic puzzles to advance and reach the end of the level. The puzzles range from matching faces, memory type games, and copying designs with falling blocks. You can't lose in this game, and if you make a mistake, it's no big deal as you can just try again. Mr. Bloopy is a mess though. You can just tell by looking at him that he's a nervous wreck. This is not how you want the hero of your game to look. The music is very simple and unappealing, and the sound effects are just horrible. The control of Mr. Bloopy isn't that great either. But like I say, it's a kid's game, so it might appeal to kindergartners who are learning about shapes and matching and stuff like that. A much better blob-type game is Jelly Boy 2 for the Super Nintendo. This game was developed by Game Freak, and as we know, Game Freak has made some great games. The first game in the series was actually released here in the USA under the name Smart Ball. Anyways, Jelly Boy 2 plays fairly similar to the first game with some minor enhancements that makes it more user-friendly. Basically, you and your friends have been turned into a ball. I'm guessing your friends were taken hostage or something because at the end of each world you rescue one of them. Once you rescue a friend, they become a playable character. They all control the same, but they each have different attacks. These attacks are helpful and necessary to defeat enemies. They range from projectiles to even a dash that can kill enemies. Besides these, you can land on top of an enemy and just push down, which will also kill them. You have the ability to stick to walls and ceilings and slide along them. I'm not sure if you can go around corners while stuck to a wall or ceiling, as I always fell off. This would be super helpful if you could. Anyways, the game is as colorful as games get, and the music is just as colorful and sweet, which is great while playing. I had a fun experience with this game, and I really don't see why it wasn't released.
Another unreleased Genesis game is Fido Dido by the world-famous third-party Kaneko. I don't know how to pronounce it. I guess Fido Dido used to be a mascot for 7-Up, and in some places of the world he still is? Weird. Anyway, right off the bat, I really don't like the controls at all. None of the buttons are where you'd expect them to be. They seem to have been designed by someone who's never played a console game before. Anyway, you play as Fido Dido, who is basically just a pencil drawing, and you've got to do some convoluted nonsense in each level. Each stage has a different task you need to accomplish, like repairing the insides of your Genesis here. Now the concept of that is kinda cool, but the way it came out here, not really. The graphics are mediocre and the game just really isn't very fun. Some of the music is decent and it's definitely the high point of the game, but really, that's not saying much. Even though that this game is reportedly finished, I'm almost kinda glad it wasn't released. Should I feel bad about that? I don't know. Time Trax on the Genesis was also finished but never released. I have no idea why not. In this one, you play as a character from the TV show who has the ability to slow down time for brief periods so that you can do what you've gotta do. You like to kill people and bust open boxes, but your absolute favorite thing to do is collecting stars and coins, just like the TV show. I've never seen or even heard of the show, to be honest, so I'm only guessing that this game is 100% faithful to the original material. I mean, it's a game, it's gotta be, right? The gameplay is fun, but it can be pretty tough at times as there aren't any continues, so be sure to bring all your skills to the table when you play this one. It's timed for PAL system, so it plays a bit too fast on the US and Japanese consoles, so if you don't live in Europe, you'll need even faster reflexes, but hey, I like it that way. The graphics are pretty good and at times exceptional. The music is also pretty good and at times, you guessed it, quite exceptional. There's definitely more good stuff than bad stuff here. The Super Nintendo version of this game was actually released and is pretty much the same game, except for the music. It's nowhere near as good as the Genesis music by Tim Fallon, and as a result, the game itself just feels a lot more boring. Overall, this is a fairly fun game, and it's always great to hear the Genesis outperforming the Super Nintendo in the sound department.
Star Trek V was a super high-profile game for the NES that never came out. I'm a huge Star Trek fan. Here's a picture of me standing next to my VHS copies of Star Trek 1 through 5. I love Star Trek V, but I sure don't love this NES game. Just kidding, I don't like the movie either. Actually, the game might be a little bit better, but it's still awful. First of all, there are a ton of typos in this game. Like control, Lerid, brainwashed, Dicide? Yeah. Anyway, there are 4 playable stages in this game, and on each stage you get to play as a different character. On stage 1, you play as Sulu, who beams down on a one-man mission to free some people from the robe-wearing villains. Sulu can jump really high because, you know, he's a ninja. It's really easy to get hit and die in this game. You can barely even see these little cannons on the ground, and you have to be right in their line of fire to blast them with your phaser. Speaking of phasers, I thought this was set to stun. How come all these guys are dying? Thankfully, this game has a password. If I enter the wrong password, it tells me to be different. But I don't want to be different, I like who I am. Anyway, stage 2 has you running around the Enterprise as Scotty trying to free Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. You can enter tons of different rooms, and they all look the same, so have fun figuring this out. Oh, and Scotty can float. Oops, sorry, I mean Scotto. Scotty's the last character I ever thought I'd see floating. Well, maybe there's a ham sandwich up there somewhere. In stage 3, you play as the Enterprise itself flying through a field of blue asteroids. If enough of them hit the ship, well, yeah, you guessed it, you die. This is a cool change, but it's tough to shoot the blue rocks without being pelted by another. Next stage, please. This is the last one where you play as Kirk. In this stage, Kirk must find and defeat God, like he does in the movie. I like how the screen describing the stage doesn't even bother to finish his thought. Upon arrival on the surface of the creation planet, Kirk... Well, Kirk what? What does he do? What's my motivation for this stage? Overall, the controls are decent, but the game design just sucks. Neither the graphics or music are anything special. Now, if only the movie could have suffered the same fate as this game and been abandoned during production.
Now we all know and love Mr. Nuts on the Super Nintendo, right? I mean, how could anyone not? He's amazing. He was also released on the Mega Drive and the Game Boy Advance, and he's clearly the sexiest squirrel mascot ever. Yeah, I know there are so many Nuts jokes I could come up with, but I'm pretty sure they've all been done already. Anyway, how about the unreleased Mr. Nuts 2, otherwise known as Mr. Nuts Hoppin' Mad on the Genesis? Yep, you're back parading your nuts around again in this unfinished prototype. This time they added a weird map mode where you go around and get hints, open treasure chests, and use bombs to clear your path in order to find the flags. And each flag is a side-scrolling stage that you've got to clear. At first these stages are really short, but they eventually get pretty damn long. The controls definitely feel unfinished as I keep accidentally popping up a menu saying that the treasure chest has already been opened when I was just trying to get rid of the menu in the first place. The side-scrolling stages can be pretty tough, and I'm not sure there's any other objective I need to worry about other than collecting gems and making it to the exit. The developers went all out on the graphics here. For a Genesis game, the color is tremendously bright. If you like pink, this might actually become your new favorite game. There's also some crazy multi-layer scrolling with tons of overlapping parallax, especially vertically. The sound effects are average, but the music was surprisingly good. I was surprised at how surprisingly good it was. I might actually record a few of these tunes for my own personal listening pleasure on my iPod. Gameplay-wise, it's really easy to get hit, and Mr. Nuts moves around really fast, which only makes it tougher. But like I said before, I like it that way, yeah, sure. Well, not all the time, I guess. Also, I feel that the overhead map portions play way too big of a role in the game. But still, I'm glad I stumbled across this game because it really showed off some of the super sweet 16-bit powers of my awesome Sega Genesis. Gym Power, the arcade game, was another cancelled game for the Genesis. This one is based on a game for the Amiga and other exciting European computers. You play as Gym Power, who is powerful in name only. In reality, he is extraordinarily weak. One touch from anything and he's dead. Even small drops of water can skeletonize him in less than a second. What a wimp. It's a pretty tough platformer, and fortunately you get some decent weaponry to help you out. Everything has a very Euro feel to it. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it's just, you can tell where it was made. The game also wants to be a horizontally scrolling shooter in some stages. These are okay. Like the platforming segments, it's really easy to get hit and die. The graphics are really good, but the scrolling is, I never thought I'd say this, but perhaps it's a little overdone. At times it can even be distracting. As a bonus, you can get a real 3D effect if you wear a pair of sunglasses with only the left eye covered while playing. The 3D effect only appears when the screen scrolls and only when you're moving to the right. It works best on the shooter stages since the screen is constantly scrolling. Also, the game is designed so that you rarely even need to walk to your left. The music is great, but there's only one tune in this unfinished version. A version of this game came out for the Super Nintendo and even for the PC Engine CD-ROM in Japan. And it has super sweet music.
Well, Joe, first good half of the show, I suppose. I mean, there's some,
like
I said, crappers, and then there's some that are pretty good.
Well, you got Mr. Blob, man, or what is it called?
Yeah, Mr. something.
No,
Mr. Bloopy.
Yeah.
Mr. Bloopy.
Amazing
game, really. So, anyways, well, and you had Mr. Nuts.
Yeah.
A big fan of nuts, aren't you? Yeah. You have nuts on your sundaes. You have nuts on your chin. You have nuts on
Anyway, you've got the first game. After this, I think we've still got some good ones to look at. Let's get going.
Okay. Sunman on the NES by Sunsoft is a game that was never even announced, much less released. I mean, usually you'd see at least a screenshot in a magazine about a game, but not this one, and it seems to me like it's 100% complete. Anyway, you play a Sunman who has a cape, he can fly, and he plays kinda similar to Sunsoft's other Superman games. Maybe that's because this actually was originally a Superman game, but Sunsoft lost their license and so it became Sunman. Hell, even the title screen barely makes an attempt to hide its Superman origins. In some stages, you run across the ground and punch enemies and other obstacles that are in your way. You can float by pressing the up button and drop by pressing jump. There's also flying levels, and these are not fun at all because it's almost impossible to not get hit by the enemies or their shots. Check out this boss fight where I need to punch this missile. How am I supposed to avoid all that? I managed to make it past though. You're doing great, Sunman! The control while platforming isn't too bad. You get 3 lives and 2 continues. The graphics are pretty good. They're what you would expect from Sunsoft on the NES, and there's even some effects here and there that you don't see in too many NES games. The music is nice and it fits the game, but it's not as good as Batman or Blaster Master or anything like that. Overall, I'm not sure why this game was cancelled, as there are plenty of released games that are far worse than this one.
Major Damage is an abandoned project for the Saturn by Capcom of all people. Or companies, I mean. Companies aren't people. Anyway, this is clearly a very early prototype, as a lot of the sprites are glitchy and the collision detection on the vertical surfaces hasn't been programmed yet. You start out by picking your character. It doesn't matter which one because they both play exactly the same way. You wander around shooting stuff and it's basically a run and gun. It's really easy to get hit in this game because you're pretty big and the controls are really slow. Thanks to some of the excessive animation, it can take what seems like at least a second to jump after you press the button. Still, your life meter is large and it's pretty tough to die. The graphics are decent, I guess. They have that 2.5D look, but the gameplay is strictly 2D. Oh hey, why not stop at Salmonella Sam's for some of their delicious sushi chicken? Once you get to the end of the third area, the game resets to the title screen. Anyway, Capcom canceled this game because, well, Sega canceled the Saturn. They pitched it to Sony on the PlayStation, but they said it looked too much like Blasto. Perhaps the best thing about this game is that it makes a reference to Street Fighter 4. How did they know that game would come out? It's like they could see into the future. How about ToeJam Earl 3 on the Sega Dreamcast? This one was about 4 or 5 months away from completion before it was cancelled and moved to the original Xbox instead. This game is a lot like the first ToeJam Earl on the Genesis, where you've basically just got to run around and collect as many presents as you can and make it to the elevator to go up to the next level. ToeJam and Earl both have a lot of voices this time around, and of course they're full of tood.
Yo, what's up?
Wait a minute. I think I've been here before.
I don't know, I kinda like the voices. There's also a third alien who's been added to the playable roster of characters. Her name doesn't even get to be in the title of the game, so I guess she's not very important.
I'm out of here.
Like the first game, you're best off by running away from the Earthlings, as they're pretty hard to defeat, if not impossible. However, you can funkify most of them, which gives them an afro. That seems to make them stop chasing you around for a bit, and it's really tough to escape a lot of the enemies who do chase you. You still have presents that you can use to help you get away, like the spring shoes. The levels don't seem randomly generated this time around, and when you fall off, you just go back to the start of that very same level. In the original game, you fell down to the level before, and if that happened in this game, that would require loading time, and that would have sucked. This game was going to have multiplayer online play, which they actually took out of the Xbox version. That version came out a few months before Xbox Live was launched. Overall, the game is somewhat decent, and it's interesting to play it on the Dreamcast. The graphics are pretty good for the most part, but all of the trees are 2D objects, so they're always facing directly towards you, which makes them look like they're spinning when you turn around. The music is definitely appropriate, with lots of funk and some arranged versions of the older tunes.
Ooh, a present.
Someone bought a Dreamcast dev kit on eBay and found this game on the hard drive and made it bootable. So you never know what other secrets may still be lurking out there waiting to be found.
Yo, what's up?
Hi!
Yeah, some money. Now that's what I'm talking about.
Mr. Tough on the Super Nintendo by the same guys who made Firepower 2000 is a basic platforming game where the object is to smash a certain amount of pillars in each level. What an interesting concept. I can't believe nobody's thought of this before. The levels in this game are all fairly short. You go through each, destroying enemies along the way, mixed with a small amount of platforming trying to find these pillars. Once you smash the last pillar, the level is over. There are boss fights at the end of each world, which is nice. The controls are fine and work well enough. Graphically, the game isn't bad and actually looks fairly good. The music's not great, but it doesn't detract from the overall experience. I'm not sure why this game didn't get released, as it feels fairly complete. I probably wouldn't have bought it though, as there are much better games out there, but who knows. Wile E. Coyote's Revenge for the Super Nintendo is exactly like the cartoon. The whole time I played, I chased and chased the Roadrunner but never caught him. I mean, really, what's the point of this game if you can't catch the damn Roadrunner? Beats the hell out of me. This game was supposed to be the sequel to Death Valley Rally, which itself was quite the turd. I've never been a big fan of Looney Tune-based games. They just feel like shovelware to me. They seem super cheap, like they were just made to make a quick buck, and they usually have no substance at all. This game is no different, and in my opinion, I'm glad it never got to the assembling line. It's really quite boring. The game controls okay, but not great. There are some branching paths that you traverse back and forth trying to catch the ever-elusive Roadrunner. I mean, I've got the damn bird in my grasp and nothing. He just speeds away. Why even bother? There is some music here, but it's so quiet I can't make any of it out at all. The sound effects are the best part of this game. They seem to be taken from the cartoon, and it's the only thing that added any enjoyment to this game at all. You'd think the game was canceled because there's no point to it, but in actuality, it was canceled because of Sunsoft's bankruptcy.
One of the higher profile unreleased games is the original Half-Life for the Sega Dreamcast. This was hot stuff back then, but nowadays everyone's totally up this guy's ass to release Half-Life 3. This is an extremely ambitious game for a console back then, and from what I've played, it's really good. You will be running into this though, and you'll be running into it a lot. Anyway, you star as this Gordon dude, and you go into this big room all by yourself to do some science, and then of course, something bad happens. Now you think all this would turn you into a superhero, but no. Instead, you get monsters and aliens roaming around everywhere. The first weapon you'll get is your crowbar. You can attack with it and of course do other things like break glass so that the glass is not there anymore and stuff like that. Later on you'll get all sorts of different weaponry, but the crowbar almost never runs out of ammo. The control feels really good for the Dreamcast pad and pretty natural for the most part. I didn't really have any problems with it, but this is coming from a guy who's not really into first-person shooters. You can also use the keyboard and mouse to control the game, but I don't have a Dreamcast mouse. I'm kind of tempted to get one now, actually. The graphics are pretty good for the Dreamcast, and sometimes you get 60 frames per second and other times maybe 5. It quite literally varies all over the place all the time. That's because this version has the HD texture mapping pack, so it looks a little better than the original unpatched release on computers. There's not a ton of music in this game, but when you first put on your suit, it starts rocking out. That's how you know you are a badass. There's also some ominous music in other areas as well. There's also quite a bit of voice work in the game.
Good morning, Mr. Freeman. Looks like you're running late.
But you wouldn't believe the load times on the way to work this morning. Now let me out of this thing, you tampon. You can also play the Blue Shift expansion pack. Remember expansion packs back in the days before DLC? Anyway, it's built right into the Dreamcast version here. This game was due to be published by Sierra, but they canceled it at the last minute due to changing market conditions. Gee, thanks guys. We sure love you.
Steven Seagal is The Final Option was an unreleased game for the Super Nintendo by Tech Magic. The game received a fair amount of press back in 1993 for its digitized characters and Steven's participation in the game's development. No, he didn't do any of the code writing, but he did model for his on-screen character. Anyway, the game was never released, and as far as I'm concerned, this is a good thing. I'm probably not the best person for this review, as I really don't like games with digitized characters like this. I know this is just a beta version, but everything is so sloppy and the controls are slow and horrendous. I don't know what the storyline is, but I'm guessing there are these evil scientists out to do something really evil, like maybe make chemical weapons or something. Steven Seagal doesn't like this, so he decides to kick the ass of every scientist he sees and anyone else that just happens to be close by. Controlling the game is kind of similar to Flashback or Blackthorn, but much worse. You feel like you're in quicksand all the time. I think the background graphics are fine, but when you put these ugly digitized models on them, they get ugly. Everything gets ugly. The music is easily the highlight of this game. It kind of makes you feel like you're on a mission to kick ass, so that does help. All in all, it's really a good thing this game wasn't released. The Super Nintendo didn't need any more crap games like this, and I would be very surprised if Nintendo actually put its seal of approval on the box. So surprised that I might have even been slightly mad at Nintendo. Yeah, right.
All right, Dave, so which would you rather play? Half-Life on the Dreamcast with all those loading times, or Steven Seagal is the final solution, or whatever the hell it was?
Oh, that's a tough one, Joe.
Is it really?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Half-Life, though, because Steven Seagal just plain sucks.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
what if he's
I don't
watching?
I'm sorry. Well, you know, I mean, he's probably happy he didn't released either because of how crappy it turned out.
Yeah,
so
maybe.
I don't know. Maybe that game was only like 70% complete, and you know, maybe it would have turned out awesome. But I highly doubt it.
Anyway, that was certainly not all of the unreleased games that are out there. There are quite a few that I wanted to put in this episode, but didn't because we don't want the episode to be 6 hours long, and I don't want to work my ass off making just one episode. So,
well, I don't blame you.
Anyway, let us know if there are any that weren't in this episode that you'd like to see the next time we cover this, because I'm pretty sure there will be a next time.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack. All right, you're gonna like this unreleased game, Dave. It's for the 32X. It's called Richard Gere's Virtual Gerbil. Now, basically, you're supposed to guide the gerbil through these colorful tubes and find the exit. I don't know. I've never really done it.
Why aren't the gerbil's legs moving?
Maybe because it's well lubricated in there. I really don't know, Dave.
Why don't you think this game was released even?
But I'm guessing because Richard Gere pulled out and they lost a celebrity endorsement and they just didn't want to finish the game.
Oh, okay, I've had enough. Why don't we try this other unreleased game that I know? It's called Bill Clinton's Virtual Stain.
What system is it for?
Oh, it's for the 32X.